Hi, I'm Nikki. I'm with the City of Vancouver's Public Works Department, and I work in the surface water program. I'm an environmental scientist with the city, and I've been in the stormwater program for about 5 years. And I'm going to talk to you tonight about the Parkview Village Townhomes stormwater swales. I'm having a technical difficulty advancing my slide. There we go. So to begin explaining the stormwater facilities, I want to talk about what stormwater is. So it's pretty straightforward, but it is a little bit of inside baseball. So stormwater isn't a real obvious terminology, but it's rain that falls on our roofs and streets and flows into the storm drains and the storm drain system. So that's straightforward. It includes rain and snow, just anything that falls and runs off of these hard surfaces. And when that water is moving through the landscape, it picks up things that it touches. So whether it's the leaks and drips from your car, that oil, trash that gets thrown out, leaves this time of year are a big issue, but definitely things like yard chemicals and pet waste as well. So for the city of Vancouver, we have stormwater requirements, and we're regulated by the state of Washington to have a program and enforce maintenance standards for these private stormwater facilities that remove pollution from the stormwater. So we're trying to keep the things like the oil, the trash, the pet waste out of the storm system and ultimately out of our waterways. So our code says that we have the authority to inspect these facilities, that they have to be maintained to the state standard or an approved technical manual, and that information is often recorded with the land information, like at the assessor's office. So the property may be a separate tract, may be recorded in a plat or a covenant. There's a couple different legal ways to do that, but the city requirements are just generally speaking that private facilities, they need to be maintained as designed. So if they are collecting water, if they're treating the water, if they're infiltrating that rain that's running off, those functions need to be maintained in that facility. And so the owner of that facility, the private swale or rain garden, bioretention cell, they're responsible for that operation and maintenance. And so what we look at is the engineering plans. That's how we decide for the maintenance what is required and what was approved at the time that the property was developed or the homes were built. So this is just some examples of plans. This isn't specific to Parkview, but it shows you the amount of detail that we're looking at and the specifications of construction for these facilities. They're engineered very specifically to function to remove pollution from stormwater. So our inspections for maintenance go back to these approved plans. We say, what did they want this swale to do? Is it still doing that? And then if there are changes to the swale, if you need to, if you're having standing water or if the drains get clogged, if there's something that's not working, that has to be reviewed by the city engineers. So any modifications to the facilities that would change that function have to be reviewed and approved by the engineers. So biofiltration swales are one of the most common stormwater facilities in the city of Vancouver, and a lot of times they're on private sites. So these are photos from Vancouver of private swales. They're a pretty low tech solution. They just look like this sort of lower area in the landscape. So the grass is helping to remove a lot of those pollutants from the stormwater. So in the picture on the left, there's kind of this metal grate that catches a lot of the trash. So, cups or water bottles, it'll catch a lot of leaves. And then the water itself can go through into the swales. So we're looking for filtration, we want the water to soak in. So most of these facilities, they aren't ponds, you know, they don't fill up with water. The water runs across them and soaks in. So, like I say, it's a pretty low tech. They take up, you know, just a little bit of area on a private property. Sometimes they just are fit in between parking aisles. You know, they can really fit into the landscape. But they were a very popular engineering option for stormwater management, especially around the mid to late 1990s. So we see them a lot. Vancouver was doing a lot of development around that time, both residential and commercial. So we see a lot of these bioswales um, on private sites. And so from the engineering perspective, there's a couple of components that are very common, and each swale is different, and each, you know, private property, they're all a little different, but generally we're looking at, you know, if you look on the left, there's an inlet, you know, where the water comes in this pipe, it runs through this swale, kind of an S shape, and then it goes out. So that's kind of at a high flow. Most of our rains in the Northwest are low intensity and long duration, you know, where it's drizzling all day long. So most of these swales, you know, the water never reaches the outlet. It soaks in. It's able to run through this path and soak in without getting to the outlet. But the energy dissipator that is typically by the inlet pipe helps to slow the water down and keep it from causing erosion. And then you might have, a lot of the older swales have what we call a flow spreader. So it's typically a little concrete band that runs across the swale, and it just helps that water to slow down. So if you do get kind of a heavier rain event, that concrete will pull the water up a little bit, and then it kind of has to slow down and soak in. The biggest, you know, common component of these swales is grass. So it's a grass channel, and the picture on the right is showing you a cross section. And so all you need to know about that is that it's a U shape. You know, you have these sloped sides and a flat bottom. It's really important to have a flat bottom. You know, they'll run water, but you don't want to have like bumps or curves, because then the water will start to move and cut and erode down into the channel. So you want it to be flat and have really good grass cover. So Parkview Village has bioswales. There are a couple of bioswales, but they're actually located in these separate tracts that in the plat, which is some of the property records, they're identified as wetland A and wetland B. So these were set aside existing wetland soils. You know, there's homes all around them, but these areas were identified as, you know, wetlands that need to be protected. They have wetland soils, they have wetland plants, and so they were set aside in these separate tracts. And we put some of the language here from the real estate records, you know, that these are supposed to remain in their natural condition. That's really important to understand. And that the vegetation has to be retained in the wetland and the buffer. If there's any kind of like hazard trees, something that's, you know, leaning over a roadway or getting close to someone's house, those can be removed, but they have to be approved by the city forester. So these tracts, wetland A and wetland B, they're part of our critical areas requirements. So they're considered natural areas. So they have to be maintained as this open space as these natural areas. And then within those natural areas at Parkview Village, there are swales. So these are the same kind of grass swales that I was explaining before. You know, there's an inlet, there's some kind of riprap or sediment control, and then grass, and then an outlet pipe. So I've got some kind of arrows here to show how the water moves through, but both of these tracts and these swales are supposed to be maintained by the homeowners association. So they are considered private facilities. They treat the private roadways from Parkview Village, that runoff, that stormwater that's coming off of the pavement goes through these facilities. So the city doesn't maintain them. And it's really important to see how they fit, how the swales fit into the critical areas, and that they're part of the wetlands, which is a little unusual, but there are a couple of other examples in the city of a similar configuration with the swales in wetlands. So I want to talk a little bit about each swale individually and explain kind of where the water goes, because it's a little bit of a complex system. And I think it's really important to understand why the stormwater is in this area and why it's important to maintain it for the homeowners. So I have kind of these lines on this diagram. There are downspout drains at Parkview that are tied into these facilities. So where I have kind of two little blue houses. Those are where the downspouts, you know, the gutters off of the houses, the townhomes are coming into these facilities. So there are separate pipes for the roof runoff, and they go right into the wetland. And that's because we assume that the water from the roof is cleaner than the water from the road. So it can direct discharge, but a lot of times those, and these are 6-inch drain lines for the roof runoff, they can become clogged, they can get crushed. There's a lot of ways that those pipes can fail. And because this is a wetland area, you may see standing water, you may see, you know, just pipe failures, you may see sinkholes, different issues related to those systems. So it's really important to maintain that connection, you know, to manage that rainfall and get it into the wetland, so that you don't have standing water on the individual lots or in the homes. And then the swale is taking the water from the private road. So I have like a little diagram of a car, showing that the swale takes the water from the private drive. And there's three main components here, structural components that need to be maintained. One is kind of right by the little car. There's a manhole there that's a pollution control manhole, and it's meant to capture trash. So it has a little guard on it so that things like water bottles or pop cans that get in there, they'll float. And that manhole can be cleaned out from the road, which makes it easier to remove the trash than if it gets into the swale, which is in the wetland. It's kind of hard to get that out of there. So again, that manhole is a private facility. It needs to be routinely cleaned. The state requires at least annual inspection and then maintenance as needed. So there isn't, you know, a prescribed maintenance schedule. There's a prescribed inspection schedule. And some streets have very little trash and very few leaves. And, you know, something like a pollution control manhole, maybe it needs to be cleaned out once a year. I've seen other areas, especially commercial areas, particularly around like grocery stores or gas stations where there's a lot of trash and debris. They may need to be cleaned out 3 or 4 times a year. So it's really important to have it inspected. And because it's a confined space underground, you need to work with a contractor who's experienced and has that certification for confined space so that they're doing it safely, performing that inspection and maintenance as needed. The next element in the swale, the next component is the riprap outlet. So that's where the pipe comes into the swale, and there's some rock there to help the water slow down and spread out. So that needs to be maintained just to make sure that you aren't having erosion in the swale. And I have some photos of the swale, but that's the idea, is that it's a 5x5 area of riprap, and it's only a foot deep. So it's, you know, it's just a few rocks deep, but it's just to really help slow the water down. And then at the far end, so moving left to right on the slide, there is a level spreader at the end before the swale connects to the city storm drain system. And so that is another of those concrete bands that just runs across the swale, that needs to be maintained and uncovered so that it has the ability to slow that water down. So here are some photos of Swale A that I was just talking about, explaining the engineering elements. Here's what it looks like. On the left is the photo at construction, so you can clearly see the rock at the beginning. there's rock at the end, there's grass in the bottom, and you see that nice U shape, right? It's got a flat bottom and then these sort of sloped sides. And then when you look at the current photos, so these are from just a couple of weeks ago, the swale has no grass left in it. And there's a lot of shade from the surrounding trees, but there's grass growing on the other side of the trees. So it looks like some of the grass has been removed in the swale. And it may be because it was holding water, or, there may be some issue with it that needs to be addressed. But the vegetation is an issue that has to be resolved for this facility to be in compliance. So we've got to get grass back in there to get the pollution removal that we're looking for. And then we also need the rock put back at the front end and at the back end, just to provide that little speed bump for the water to slow down and soak in. It also gives a place for sediment to accumulate that comes off of the street. That little bit of fine dirt that's in that stormwater runoff, it builds up in the rocks and it has to be cleaned out. So we know the rocks were there at the beginning, and so they may be buried in the sediment, or a landscaper may have removed them. But either way, in the approved engineering plans, these were important components, so they need to be restored. There are some other issues in terms of the general maintenance of the facility. There is a small amount of trash. The level spreader, the concrete band, isn't visible. And there is sediment at the inlet pipe. So there's definitely some concerns about those two components, the inlet and the outlet, that really need to be addressed in swale A. And then in swale B, I was breaking down the same components here. So the roof runoff is also tied into this wetland facility. So there is a series of pipes. So these are 4-inch and 6-inch pipes that tie in the downspouts to the townhomes and then drain them into the wetland. So it's really important that those pipes are maintained, that they're cleaned out, that they don't have root intrusion. The roots of the trees will follow the water and can crush those pipes and damage them. So to prevent flooding on the property, it's really important to maintain those pipes, make sure they're cleaned and open, working properly. And then the bulk of the bioswale is from the private road again. So I have like the picture of the little car, and you can see the water coming down into the swale. And this one is kind of a C shape. And the idea there is to give the water more time to soak in. So we're kind of taking it down this longer path to soak in. And it has those same components. There's a pollution control manhole up by the little car, to catch trash and debris from the road, leaves, that kind of thing. So that needs to be inspected and likely maintained. And then the riprap, the rock at the inlet pipe, and when you get to the end, another level spreader, that concrete band that's going across the swale. So it's very similar to swale A, but it's a little bit longer. It's just taking the water through a little bit longer, trying to soak it in. And it's worked in with this wetland, this preserved natural area. So it may be hard to visually see it, but it's really important for removing the pollutants from the stormwater. And we have some of the photos from this same facility. The photo on the left is when it was constructed. So again, you can see there's that nice U shape. There's a flat bottom and these sloped sides. You can see that clear C shape on it. You're kind of standing at the curve and looking at that clear C shape. And then in the photos from a couple of weeks ago, you can't really see the swale anymore. You don't see the grass. There is like a low area, but it doesn't have that nice U shape cross section that we're looking for. So the grass is a big issue for maintenance and needs to be restored to bring the facility into compliance. And then the rock, the riprap, is also missing So the inlet pipe, we can't see the pipe where the water comes in off of the road, which is a big problem because um, it will back water up into the rest of the system if the water can't get out of that pipe. So it needs to be uncovered. It needs to have its rock riprap put back or dug out. And some of the trash that we're seeing in here would have to be cleaned out. And then at the outlet structure, we don't see the level spreader. So on the right, that photo is showing the outlet, that angled drain, but we should see rock and concrete at the end again. So it's missing some of those key functional components to remove pollution. And so generally, we want to talk about how to perform maintenance because a lot of homeowners aren't familiar with this process, aren't familiar with the terminology. So one of the big things is just doing a private facility log, just having records of when you had it inspected. We want to make sure that you have a routine maintenance plan in place so that you're doing a little bit of maintenance as you go instead of, coming back and having to do a major rebuild. The analogy I use a lot of times is like roofing material. If you let your roof go for 15 or 20 years instead of replacing it at 10 years, you might have to replace, the sheeting underneath. You might be replacing a lot more of the structure of the roof than just the shingles. If you defer maintenance, it's more expensive. So having a routine maintenance plan not only allows you to budget and have an idea for what you're going to spend on these facilities, but it also keeps them from being more expensive, accumulating sediment and trash. And then you want to keep records. If you hire a contractor to come out and inspect the manholes, you want to have a record of and then if maintenance is performed, have a record of how often, you're doing maintenance. Some of these cartridge filters, like the photo on the right, one inspector may come out and say, oh, they need replaced, and another inspector comes out and says that they look new to me. So it's really important to have records for your private facilities. And then know who is managing the maintenance. Is it your HOA manager? Is it, this third party that you're paying to oversee a lot of the HOA functions? Is there a committee? Is there a chairperson in the HOA? Just have some kind of plan of who is managing the maintenance, just so it doesn't fall by the wayside. It's easy to forget these things are out there, especially when they're in these wetlands, kind of off to the side, maybe out of sight, out of mind. Making a plan and doing routine maintenance really helps with that. And then having a copy of the approved engineering plans can be really helpful when you're hiring a contractor or when you're looking at routine maintenance, just being able to plan and factor costs. And the city has copies of all the approved plans. We can provide them in email or hard copy. It's really important for the HOA as the ownership of these facilities to have the approved plans and be familiar with those records. So a lot of these swales can be maintained either through a landscaper or even self-performing. If you have homeowners that are really interested in the facilities or, spend time in the wetlands, it can be easy for them to pick up some trash. But like the photo with the trees, it's clearly being maintained by, some kind of landscape provider. And a lot of this work is easy enough for them to look at. So some of those activities you can self-perform include mowing, for the grass, planting or reseeding, and that includes sod. You can purchase sod. You don't have to get a contractor for that. Weeding is another big one because these swales are in wetlands. You can't really use most commercial herbicides. So you don't want to just go pick something up at Home Depot to spray in these facilities. It can really damage the wetlands, but pulling weeds, cutting weeds back, all of those things you can do on your own. It doesn't necessarily have to be a hired contractor. And then again, sediment and debris removal, picking up trash, cleaning leaves off of the storm drains, cleaning the leaves out in front of the pipes. Those are things that anyone can do. And a really good resource is our Stormwater Partners website. So we have facility maintenance guidelines on that website, and it's just stormwaterpartners.org. And you can click on these different swale types or ponds, whatever kind of facility you have. Treatment wetland is featured on this website as well. So you can get more information, see photos of what it maybe is supposed to look like. You can get contractor lists. There's a lot of resources on the Stormwater Partners website. I would really strongly recommend you take a look at that. And then one thing we do really stress is that contractors should be performing certain types of maintenance. So some of these structures are confined spaces. They're underground, they're closed. It's not safe for the average person or even a landscape contractor to like get down in your pollution control manhole. You really want to hire somebody that's got the tools and the training to do that. The underground facilities are one, especially vacuuming out the storm drains that are on the private road. Some of that can be self-performed, but then you have this waste, this kind of sludgy waste that's in the bottom of the storm drains. What do you do with it? How do you get rid of it? If you hire a contractor that they can come out with a vacuum, that's what this guy is doing. He's vacuuming out a filter. They can just stick that vacuum in your storm drains, clean them out in 2 seconds, and properly dispose of that waste. So a lot of times it's worthwhile to have your storm drains vacuumed by a contractor. And then if you have to do a large rehab, if your swale have to have a lot of sediment removed, if you have like a cracked concrete outlet or inlet, if you have pipes that get blocked, like I was explaining about the downspout pipes connecting into the wetland, that's something that if you hire a contractor, they're going to be able to go in and clean out those roots. They can go in with a cutter, even somebody like Roto-Rooter, they can go in and just cut out those roots. It's definitely not something you want to try to self-perform. It can really damage the system. And it's something that, if you get a qualified contractor, they can do it a lot more quickly than the average homeowner. And really keep in mind that you may need professional help, not all the time, but for some tasks. And when you're coming up with your maintenance plan and you're thinking about that routine maintenance, know when to call your contractors. Feel comfortable doing that, have very clear expectations on when that's going to happen. So we do have a contractor list available, and we recommend that homeowners get multiple bids that are detailed of the work that's going to be needed, and ask if the contractor will guarantee their work, guarantee that the seed will grow, that the sod will take, that the water will run. It's really important to get those kinds of assurances. And again, talking about, when to hire a professional, when you're looking at something like removing sediment, if you have to remove sediment from a swale, you want to make sure you get a few different bids, because especially with these wetlands being nearby, some contractors may not be familiar with those facilities, so they may charge you a lot more than other contractors. So it's important to compare costs and really look at the detailed scope that you get from each contractor. And the city is available, our staff is available to help review bids, help you meet with contractors, better understand how to get this work done, how to scope it out and get an outcome that you're both happy with. And, with any stormwater facility, we really want to emphasize preventing pollution. And it's a lot of small actions that can really add up. But especially with your bioswales being adjacent to these wetlands and your stormwater, going into these wetland areas, it's really important to prevent pollution, to keep it out of the swale, to keep it out of the wetland. If you can keep trash and leaves out of your storm drains, it's going to be so much easier to manage that. Routinely cleaning the catch basins, vacuuming out the storm drains, hiring a contractor to do that is really important. And the diagram that we're showing here on the right is just the average catch basin has between 12 and 24 inches of storage space in the bottom for sediment and trash. So, the water, if it's backing up at the pavement, you've got a solid, 2 or 3 feet of debris in that storm drain. So, they're meant to hold that material so that you can vacuum it out. But if you're seeing water standing, you've got a lot of debris built up. So routine cleaning of those will really help alleviate any standing water or flooding problems. And, in the same vein of prevention, if you have, for the private street, if you can have it swept routinely, that really helps. And it's not only picking up trash or leaves, kind of fine dirt that gets out into the road or bark dust, but it also picks up the asphalt, the little bits of asphalt that come off just in, routine rains and traffic and wear and tear from tires. Having a sweeper come through can keep that asphalt, that fine asphalt, out of your storm drains and just prevent that from being a big issue taking up your storage space. And we definitely want to encourage homeowners to look around their facilities, look at their storm drains after heavy rains, see if there's standing water, see if water's backing up, see if there's trash or leaves. That's the best time to see how things are working, is either during a storm or right after a storm. Just see how things look. Do you see a lot of sticks and debris around your storm drains? It can really help to identify issues and kind of raise that awareness of the maintenance that's needed. And then spills are a big issue for private facilities, and typically it's related to automotive materials, antifreeze, oil, so anything you can do to clean up these kind of drips and drops in the street, in the private street, or on driveways. So this center photo is a driveway. If you just put down some kitty litter and sweep it into those spots, it'll keep it from running off. And the picture on the right is showing that oil sheen getting into a storm drain. It takes very little oil to create those sheens. Once the rain hits that oil, it really spreads and makes it look a lot worse. So if you could just put down a little bit of kitty litter, sweep it on the driveway. If you have a spill, someone knocks over a container or something like that, you can use kitty litter or like a floor sweep. Anything like that, dry material, and you want to put it down and sweep it in to absorb, and then you want to sweep it up and put it in the trash. You don't want it to end up in the storm drains. So those are just small things that you can do that prevent that kind of wear and tear on your swales and keep the pollution out of the wetlands. This picture on the left is the sediment that's built up in the manhole just from, dirt washing off of a street. You can see it's up pretty high, and it's a real fine, it's like a peanut butter, it's not like soil that you want to shovel out and do something with. It's just a real fine, mucky sediment. And that's the kind of thing you want to have somebody vacuum out for you. The picture on the bottom left is a backpack leaf blower, and he's blowing dirt off of the pavement. And that is not effective at removing the dirt. It just settles down and lands somewhere else. So we really want to emphasize sweeping, getting a vacuum sweeper out to do that. And, a contractor coming through, a couple times a year, it's pretty inexpensive, and it prevents this kind of DIY management of those pollutants. And soil is the number one pollutant in stormwater runoff. It's just a really big issue. It's a big problem for our infiltration systems, where we're trying to get the water down into the grass. If it's covered in this fine silty sediment, it blocks it off, and it can't soak the water in. It's also really bad for our rivers and streams. It's really bad for the wetlands at Parkview. So something to keep in mind for preventing pollution. So that was just a quick rundown of Parkview Village. I just wanted to provide my contact information here. If you have other questions or want to follow up on any of this information, I'd be happy to talk to you. We do a lot of this kind of outreach with private owners, helping folks look at contractor bids, figure out their budget planning, work with their HOA managers. We're really here to help. So really encourage folks to just reach out and let me know what I can do to help get these facilities back into compliance. And, any resources that we have, we're happy to provide. So, and if you remember nothing else from the presentation, the bottom line is only rain down the drain, right? Because these storm drains end up in wetlands at Parkview, or this photo is showing the Puget Sound. The Columbia River is ultimately where a lot of our stormwater ends up. So only rain down the drain is a great rule of thumb. Keep that in mind whenever you're thinking about stormwater in your neighborhood. So thanks for your time. Thanks for joining us tonight. I really appreciate you taking some time to watch this presentation, and look forward to working with you on stormwater facility maintenance in Vancouver.